Hey guys, my name is Noah. I'm just going to be walking you through a quick build using some stuff from my marketplace, as well as just kind of showcasing some general lighting tips and features. So before we start anything, you're going to want to come over here to your project settings, go over to rendering, and make sure you're generating mesh distance fields. You can also turn this off if you're only using dynamic lighting. I'm also going to include a link to Epic's documentation about light propagation volumes because we are going to be using that today. So to start off, this is my Midwestern Mountains pack. I'm just going to be using it as the backdrop for showcasing some of the trees from my white pine pack today. This is exactly what it'll look like when you open this up. It'll just be this. But I'm going to go ahead and delete all of the lighting information today so that we can go through and rebuild that. And that's what it looks like. Okay, so I'm also going to be using Ultra Dynamic Sky. It's just really good dynamic sky box. First thing we're going to want is a directional light. Make sure that's movable and set the intensity to 3. Atmospheric fog, yes. And we're going to want to check this light propagation volume. The next thing we're going to want to add is a skylight. We're also going to want to set that to movable and set this minimum distance field occlusion to 0.15. That'll show up later on the meshes, the importance of that. Next, we're going to come over here, make sure that Ultra Dynamic Sky is referencing our actors, and then finally we're going to add a height fog. I'm just going to hide that for now because it looks terrible until you dive a lot into it. So, I like Ultra Dynamic Sky because it just lets you make really quick adjustments to your dynamic light on the fly, changes the cloud cover and all that. It's just really nice for setting up scenes. So, I'm going to pick a spot now, and I'm just going to go through some of the white pine assets. Maybe here. I'm also going to be, for setting up the scene, using the water planes. This is available from the Unreal launcher under the Learning tab. I'm just going to be using the lake water. Just going to make that massive scale. And we're going to bring that up maybe around there. Seems good, right? Okay, and I'm going to bring this tiling up a little bit, variation amount. I'm going to bring this maybe there. Maybe, I don't know, I'll have to jump into third person and see how it looks when I'm actually in the game. But for now, that'll do. I'm also going to work on those textures in a bit as well. But for now, let's go over to our trees. So, first couple meshes, these are going to be, I believe it's 90 feet, and then it kind of goes down in size. So, I'm just going to drop all of these into our foliage editor, and we're going to start painting these in. You know what, I'm just going to leave it to fairly sizable meshes first, and then we'll do smaller ones later. So some universal ones you're going to want to have ticked for everything are these two. This is our distance field ambient occlusion trigger, and this is our light propagation volume trigger. Align to normal, make sure that's turned off, and just give it a random yaw, or a random pitch angle of 5 degrees. I like to be conservative with the scale. There's enough models, and they're, you know, they go across the range of size. So 0.8, 1.2. Now for density, I'm thinking the bigger ones, maybe 1, and then these I'll make 2, and then this I'll make 3. And I have a feeling this is going to be too dense, so I'm just going to make that 1 now. And then let's see what that looks like. It's going to compile the billboard shader. That's why some of them look like that. But yeah, I think this looks pretty good. When we go more into the light, it'll definitely help. And I might do some tweaks to that billboard shader as well. But density is there. I think this is the right amount of density to have. Just gonna pop some trees into the background. Oh, you know what? I forgot to. I also like to just come in here to the global and then add a landscape layer restriction. So this will make sure that you can just take a real big brush, paint everywhere, and it's not going to appear on any rock. It's just only going to appear on, well, in this case, the forest layer. You can set that to anything though, sediment, anything, rock, snow. Just really nice feature. So I'm just going to paint some of these into our background. The billboard shader is looking a bit bright. I might tweak that. Depends once I get the lighting done how it looks. But I think it's okay for now. So I'm just going to paint these in. Okay. Going to paint a couple more closer to the camera now. I'm thinking of setting up our camera somewhere in this vicinity. Okay, I also forgot to add one thing. You're going to want to add a post-process volume as well. Make sure this is unbound. That will ensure that it's affecting the entire scene. The last thing you're going to want to do with this for now is come into the exposure and get rid of this god-awful auto exposure. Okay. So that will make sure that it doesn't get randomly brighter or darker depending on where you're looking. You can always add the exposure later. It's something you want to kind of add last after your lighting is already done. But I think this is a good enough backdrop to kind of get in and get more specific with an area. So I'm going to get a scale, a sense of scale here. I forgot the high fog actor hidden game. Okay, so our texture is way too big, definitely. But otherwise, I'd say things are looking not bad so far. So I'm going to paint a couple more trees in, and I'm going to dive into the shader settings, and we're going to look at changing up those textures and or making them a bit smaller. Paint a couple more trees in here. Okay. And I'll be going through with a brush with some smaller props once I get sort of the look of the general scene that I want. I think I'm going to set up my cinematic camera actor probably here. I think that's a good spot. Yeah. So now I'm going to add a cinematic camera actor. I'm going to pilot this actor, and I'm going to put it over where I wanted it, which was here, I believe. Here. Can't remember if the focal length is a little aggressive. Can dial this back. I think it was around here. Yeah, this right here. I like this. This looks good. Okay, so now I'm gonna do a little more. Actually, do I want to do the props or the light? Let's work on our light a bit. So first thing I want to do is get out of this cinematic camera. Make sure you're not always piloting that. So now we're going to work on our light a bit. So first thing we're going to do is mess with where the directional actor is actually casting shadows and pointing. I think maybe I want something to play nice with the mountains in the background. So somewhere around sunset is probably good. And I'm also going to play with the angle of the sun to get the shadows we want. Actually, I kind of like maybe maybe that. Sure. Okay, so some tweaks I do from just the standard setup is I come in here and I bring the skylight intensity down. Usually 0.5 to start with for a bit, and then I bring the directional light up. Oh, this was supposed to be a 3. I always put it at 5 though anyway. Make sure that's... And then light color, I like to use... Just reset this to default. I don't know why that wasn't default. But I like to mess with this light color. Maybe something like that. Oh, I know why it wasn't that color, because of ultra dynamic sky. Yeah. I don't really like the clouds that ultra dynamic sky has, so I always just turn those off. Okay, so now I think our light, it's not bad. It's getting there. Gonna see what this looks like with the full. Yeah, see, I don't like that. Go back to our directional light. Okay, so let's turn on the fog now. Boy, that's a lot of fog. Make sure that's volumetric. Come back over to our directional light and make sure that we're using light shaft bloom. I don't like using light shaft occlusion personally. I think it looks better with just the bloom. But this is way too thick, so we're gonna have to bring this down a lot. Height fall off. No, that's not what we want. Bring the density down. Yeah, okay, see there. It's getting a little better. I'm not sure what's going on with our fall off. Extinction scale. Okay. Alright, it's getting somewhere. I like to change the albedo of our volumetric a bit to make this maybe a little bit of a warm color maybe. So go with our directional light temperature being a bit warmer as well. Something like that. Okay. I'm going to reset this to a little bit of a whiter color like that. And I think that's looking pretty good. You can fiddle around obviously with this. This is a hugely fiddleable setting. You can also obviously physically move the actor up and down. And that can kind of give you kind of a more ground-oriented haze, like that, where you're still getting some clarity on the mountain peaks. But I think that's good where it is for now. Let's see. Let's start putting in some smaller props, I think. So now I'm going to go over to my plants, and I'm going to start dragging in a couple of these plants. Some ferns, ground ferns. These are some just ground leaves. Some clovers. And I'm going to uncheck my trees. Check all of these again. Do the same thing with distance field and light propagation. Set this to forest. And then, yeah, I'll do the scale individually, I think, for these, as well as the density, because I don't really know what it's going to look like when I start painting it. I'm thinking 10 is probably going to be sufficient. I'm going to bring this brush down a little as well. Okay, so first I'm going to start painting some ferns. I think I like to start with kind of bigger and move down from there. So let's do just this one type of fern first. And for ferns especially, you can go for a free and just kind of let them grow in different directions. Gives a lot more variety. to your meshes. Even though there's only 2 ferns, it won't look like 2 ferns when you do this. It'll look like, 50 different fern models. But yeah, so how big are those in relation to the character? That's what I want to see. Yeah, so they're kind of small ferns. I could even go a bit bigger here, maybe 1.3 and 1.7, maybe. I think that'll look good. And I think they could be a little more dense too. Why not? We're making a dramatic scene after all. Yeah, so there we go. That's pretty nice. So I'm just gonna paint some of these in. It's not like our cinematic camera is really gonna pick up these too much into the distance, but I'm just gonna, why not, paint these around. Okay. I forget what our cinematic angle looks like. I could pull it up in a second viewport, which is what I would recommend doing if you're making a scene. But I'll paint these around for now. Why not? Okay, so let me get rid of that one. So that's our ferns done. And I also forgot that this is set to be hidden in game. We don't need that anymore. Let's have a look at our cinematic camera. So I'm going to move this, I think I'm going to move this down a little bit. Maybe there. Yeah, I think that looks good. So now I'm going to do some smaller props and start focusing on some of these empty areas. You don't necessarily have to not pilot the actor when you're doing this. I like to actually just keep piloting the actor because it's your static viewport of what people are going to see. So you can just fill these in, a couple clovers. A little hard to see, but everything adds. I'm going to take these 2 ground ferns next. These are a little bigger. Oh, I forgot to set a scaling. Make a point. Nah, let's go crazy. 1.7. There we go. There's some ground ferns. Okay, I think I need to add some smaller trees now as well. So I'm gonna add these. These are all the kind of smaller trees. Gonna go down here, toggle these same things again. Make sure that's set to I think 7. We'll do 0.8, 1.2, and see how that looks. Yeah, so it's gonna start adding some kind of smaller pine trees. I don't like that. 1 there. Give me a good spawn. There we go. So this will kind of fill out our ground cover a bit more. Yeah, something like that looks nice. Oh, I forgot to align these to the normal like that. You're gonna want to make sure that that pesky align to normal isn't checked for your trees. It can look okay sometimes, but when you start to get really steep, it looks terrible. You can restrict it to spawn at certain angles here, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. And finally, we've got some dead trees. These I like to kind of place by hand. If you're just making a scene, you can place these by hand. I think they're the kind of asset that'll look really obviously tiled if you have a lot of the same ones in your scene. So I kind of like to just place these in here and there individually. Not really worrying about performance right now or anything like that. I'm just trying to showcase what is included in all these packs. Put some ground debris in there. This is a piece of photogrammetry ground that I actually captured from the location. This one is a little tricky to use, but it can look quite nice when you do get it working properly. But obviously you gotta sculpt your ground to make sure that it's not clipping with it or anything like that. But I don't know. There, does that look like it's clipping? It's not blending with the landscape just yet. I'm gonna go to the shader after this, I think, and mess with the tiling. But maybe somewhere there. It's subtle. It'd be a little more obvious in certain situations. It's snapping. I forget how to. There it is. Okay, so I'm gonna just line this up. I guess about there. That looks good. Okay, so what now? Now I think I'll go back to the fog for now. I'm gonna do a couple of more tweaks with this. Not entirely satisfied with this. I think it needs to be more volumetric in here. View distance. I'm gonna bring this a little less. The scattering distribution is a big one as well for changing kind of how the fog appears on the map. Something like that. It's probably nice. Now I'm going to go back to my ultra dynamic sky. I'm going to play around with where this angle is coming from again. I'm thinking maybe that kind of looks nice. You're getting more of the roughness textures coming out. Okay, so now I'm gonna have a look at this landscape shader. So this is the auto material that's included with pretty much everything that I come out with. So the White Pine Forest Pack comes with a couple good ground textures as well that I think I'm gonna use here. Close albedo, close normal, far normal. So this is your standard kind of shader. It's got 3 levels. You've got your close level, you've got your kind of medium level, and then you have your global level. And it'll seamlessly switch between those based on where the camera is. Right now, I'm just going to work on kind of the very close camera. I'm going to take this needles texture that I got from the location, and I'm going to use that. And I'm also going to play with this tiling because I think it's a little big right now. I think that's better. 3. I like that. And after that, so now I'm going to talk, I guess, a bit about LPV. So over here, we should be able to get a good idea of what it's doing if I exit this camera actor. So we've got our trees here. It might not be super noticeable on these trees, but we'll see. So you can test it being on and off by just toggling this. It's very subtle right now, but I can boost this indirect, and then you'll see kind of what it's doing. It's basically giving you a little bit more bounce light through your trees. I think that's a bit aggressive. I think maybe 3 here, and then you can kind of see what this is doing. Specifically kind of around this area, the underside of leaves and trees, you'll see just a boost to the transmission of light. It's not super noticeable in this scene, I guess, just because of where my light is. But let's see. I'm just going to throw another tree in there. Mess around with my time of day again, I think. I want a sunset, so maybe there. Now that's moody. I'll move that over there. Ooh, I like that. Okay, let's do that. Skylight. I'm gonna bring the skylight down a bit more because there's just a little bit too much illumination coming from nowhere. And then come back here. Yeah, I like that. I think that looks quite nice. Yeah. So this is just going to be a fiddling process, what looks best. I still think there's a bit too much fake GI coming from this light. You can see it definitely here on the back of the trunk. I think it's a little aggressive. Maybe set this back to 1. Yeah, see there, that's a good amount right there. Okay. I think that's pretty much gonna do it. Maybe toss a couple of these leaves in there. But yeah, that's the gist of these packs. Oh, I'll go through the wind as well. I forgot that there's wind with all the assets. It works on all of them, and I'll show you where you can find those settings. Okay, getting carried away. Alright, so if you want to adjust the wind, you're going to come over here, and there's going to be 2 parameters in here. One is going to be the intensity, and one is the speed. So by default I had this at 0.4, I think, and you can see it's kind of giving a nice jostle to everything. So the intensity is going to crank up basically how much it displaces the mesh cards. So if you want a more aggressive wind, you would bring this up 7, and then a wind speed maybe of 0.6. Get some kind of aggressive wind going. Yeah, I like 0.4 and 4. I think that's a good value. So, the wind is pretty kind of a simple implementation. I'm working on pivot painted wind next, which should bring some more kind of lifelike movement to the actual mesh branches and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to see in the Midwestern Mountains pack and the White Pine Forest pack. Have a great day.